If your life was a movie, what movie would it be? Welcome to Movie Beings. I'm Darren.
And I'm Tim.
Today we will talk about one of my all-time favorite movies, The Shawshank Redemption. Well, I mean, in case you are one of those few people who haven't seen the movie, Tim will encapsulate the the movie for you right now.
It's quite hard to encapsulate it, but it's basically about a man getting falsely accused and gets sent to prison and dealing with his life in prison and all the like twists and turns of that and him trying to figuring that all out, basically. That's kind of the baseline without spoiling too much of the other things going on in the movie, but...
I mean, I really don't want to give you guys the spoilers because this is not one of those movies you want to like...
I will say, it's been out a little while. So
yeah.
you know...
And this is one of the interesting things about this movie is because it's the #1 rated movie on IMDB.
Ah, yeah.
And the older generation is introducing this movie to the younger generation. So that's why it's staying relevant. And it's getting new and newer reviews every day. So that's why, like yesterday I was thinking, well, you know, if we're going to do this movie, should we just review all the twists and turns? But then I thought... But if the younger generation is going to watch this movie again, we don't want to spoil the ending for them. Too much.
I don't think it's... I think you're over worrying about it a bit. I don't think it's... Because, like, it is an old movie, and it's been, like you said, it's highly rated now. So I don't think it's... Like, we want to be able to talk about the movie in its full. Like, I don't think we need to hold back on spoilers too much.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to be listening to podcast about movies and it's like, oh, we're going to skip around some of this stuff.
No, it's true. It's true.
I could maybe understand if it's a brand new movie, but even then I would prefer to talk about it without.
One would look and in today's days and age with the internet, like movies get leaked and scenes get leaked and...
That's true. But also when people see it and then they put it on their YouTube and then they show it as well. So you're like, oh, I wonder what this... Oh, my bloody this YouTube's guys put it all in his thumbnail. Okay. Well, now I know what happens in that movie now. That guy died. No.
Yeah. I see. Well, let's talk about the first time that you saw this movie.
Oh, God.
So I can tell you about my first time seeing this movie. It was 11 years ago when I first came to Australia. I had a lot of free time back then. So I had a plan to watch at least 3 to 5 movies a day.
Damn.
Well, I mean... As I mentioned, I had a lot of free time back then,
yeah.
But you know, I didn't know where to start to find movies. So what I did was I went on IMDB, and I just looked up the list of the best 100 movies of all time, and Shawshank Redemption was #1, and it was more than 10 years ago. So I watched it for the first time in my bedroom, and I still remember that it gave me this sensation of joy at the end of the movie. And I think since then I watched it another 2 or 3 times, but every time I watch it, I discover some new details, some new lessons, some new nuances that I didn't recognize the first time I watched it. What about you? What was when was your first time viewing this movie?
Honestly, cannot remember. Can't remember if I watched it when I was younger or not, but I definitely probably would have watched it as an adult. I don't know if I would have interested me some like prison movie until like probably hearing other people speak about it because everyone raves about the movie. I don't think you find too many people saying it's not a good movie.
Yeah.
But like I still like obviously we watched it recently so it's all fresh in our minds, but like it's just such a unique story in the way they tell it.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, it sends such a good message throughout the movie, which I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Because it can be so rough at times in the movie and it's just like, oh.
Yeah.
It could have kept along with those lines of like having maybe a rough ending or something, but you know, it tries to find, you know, a bit of hope, which I find is like the main message of the movie.
Correct.
Is like hope.
Correct.
They talk about it a lot.
Yeah, and I would love to talk about that underlining theme a bit later, because it's such a good message. But let's start with: can you imagine, like in today's days and age, what if this movie is on YouTube for free? How many views do you think it's gonna get?
Well, I'd probably get a lot, but like you're saying from the beginning, like just released on there without anyone knowing about it, or you mean released now that everybody...
Like release now on YouTube.
I probably think it would do all right. Maybe not as good as you thought it might. Like I think a lot of people would probably get a lot of views, but considering it had already been out, people would probably be like, oh, maybe if they haven't watched it before, they'd be like, oh, I'd have a watch. But because I feel like it's on a lot of streaming services now, it isn't so hard to find the movie now anyway, even if you don't own it or stream it. So I think it would do all right, but it wouldn't be like crazy. Like I think if you put a Marvel movie on there for free, I think it'd get like billions of views because people are like, ooh. But I think a lot of people would watch this movie, but it is still like it's not. There are parts in it that are a bit rough to watch, but it's not. It's not like an easygoing movie. I would say that you could just sit down and just watch and just be like, oh. There's a lot of things and a lot of themes in this movie that are like could be a bit rough, and you'd like, oh, if you just want to sit down and relax, it might, avoid those things. But
do you think that like this type of movie would work in today's format? Because I think like for this movie, it works really well when you're in, I would say, a bit isolated environments like the cinema, or when you watch it at home when you don't have all the distractions from the outside world. But with YouTube, I think YouTube is big because it's very mobile. You can watch it pretty much anywhere. But this is a very long movie. It's a 3-hour movie. Like who would have time to watch a 3-hour movie on their phone?
But there are a lot of like, long form content that people enjoy where you can stop it and come back to it. But yeah, that's probably another thing. I think people prefer, if they're watching it on YouTube, they might be like, I prefer it, and you spend like 10, 15 minutes watching a video or something and then move on. Maybe have something on in the background, but this is definitely something you'd want to try to concentrate and watch.
I'm surprised that I haven't seen that many short form cuts of this movie out there, because this movie is such a quotable movie.
I think a little bit, but I think because of the message it sends, it's not like there's some witty moments, but it isn't like gotcha moments. I think that's what people like a little bit of a gotcha moment.
Yeah.
Where I feel like a lot of the lines in this usually have a bit of weight towards them. Like there's a lot of stuff about like dealing with life and hard decisions and like moving forward in life. But I think it would do all right, but maybe not like great as like a witty moment from a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
Where he's like, haha, thanks for giving me my hammer, Thor. Oh, I can't believe he held that hammer. Whoa.
Yeah, man. I think that's right. I think now like this movie wouldn't work in today's format because I think this is a much longer journey, and the viewers, they don't get that instant gratification as they usually get. So I don't think it will work on the modern format.
I think if it was never released and the movie was released today like normal, I think it would do. It's funny. I reckon it'd do better now as a movie than it would back then, because it didn't do well when it first released.
Oh, yeah.
It was very poorly received.
Yes.
And it's like later over the years when people have gone over it and been like, oh wow, this is really good movie. How did it not catch any steam? Yeah. Which is kind of crazy to think about, because you watch it like, how did people not
like this movie?
The thing is, like, people might have been like, oh, it's a long movie, and it is a slow process, but I think it needs it. Because it really, if you didn't have that slow process, like it doesn't get the message across quite as well if they sped up points or maybe missed some things in the movie. But I think it would do well in a movie setting. I think it would do probably better, but it's hard to say how it would have been made today compared to... Yeah. What year was this released in?
1994. 1994,
So.
and it was in the cinema, and you're right. So this movie had a budget of $25 million back then. And when it was released in the cinema, it got back 17.8.
Yeah,
so it lost money.
Yeah, it lost money.
But then, so this movie got like the Oscar nomination, and back then they didn't have like marketing. So word of mouth was like the form of marketing. And so it got out, and then people started watching it. And now this movie is still earning revenue from the other forms, like just like you mentioned, the streaming services. VHS was the streaming services back then.
I don't know if it's streaming, you got to go and pick it up. But
yeah, VHS, and then and when the movie got out, and then more and more people watch it, and then just gained the popularity over time. And as I mentioned at the beginning, like the older generation is introducing this movie to the younger generation, and it's still gaining that momentum. And not just that, now that movie is also quoted in different shows, in different like modern TV shows, so it keeps it relevant as well.
I think a lot of shows and stuff now will like to quote better things and other things, to be like, oh, look at us quoting something you remember, which is, it's a big part of our media these days, but,
it's a testament of how good a movie is, right?
It is, but, when I watch horror shows, like a new show or a new movie's got to stand on its own legs before it can start quoting better movies to be like, oh, look how good this is.
Wow. So you're a harsh critic, Tim.
Well, maybe, but I try not to.
No, you should be.
Much,
no, I think we should be.
But yeah, I can see like why people would cry. It does have a lot of good lines, like you're saying before.
Yeah.
It's many great lines, I think.
I mean, speaking of lines, let's talk about some of the characters. Who's your favorite main characters, or just characters in general in this movie?
I guess it is probably Andy and Red, because obviously it's like their like friendship and relationship through most of the movie.
Yeah.
And like Brooks, obviously that's a sad story as well,
Yeah.
and that's pretty brutal. I think that really kind of sets the tone.
Yeah.
Like obviously there was already some pretty bad things that happened in the movie before that, but just like the reality of life after getting out of prison was pretty brutal. And it's like a man, well, I think they said 50 years he was in there.
Yeah.
And then as he comes out to reality into the world, and it's like, oh, he was saying, it's like, oh, I didn't see cars when I only saw 1 or 2 motormobiles when I was a child. And then when he's out there now, they're everywhere. And he's like, oh, this is like, you're in like a coma for 50 years essentially. Because back when this is set, is it like the 40 or like, I know it goes through a few years.
Yeah.
But like, they don't have like the internet like we do now. So even it's like quick to get information. Back then you probably wouldn't get, a state of how life is like in the real world.
Yeah.
And then him like going out trying to deal with it, and he's like, I can't.
Yeah.
Like, I can't deal with this because I had my place in prison. I knew what my life was like.
Yeah.
I had a job. I had things to do.
Yeah.
When in the world he's lost essentially.
And it just came to me now, but that kind of concept is being used again in Futurama.
Oh,
You know what I mean? Like the main character is in a coma for like what, 10,000 years?
1,000 years, I think. So 2,000 to 3,000.
Yeah. So, but like, can you imagine yourself being in a coma for a long time? What would you have done? Like, what would you done?
I don't know. It'd be like missing out on so much would be strange because like maybe your loved ones have gone.
Yeah.
The world would. Honestly, it'd be changing more rapidly than it did then. It was still changing rapidly in the early 90s. But now, like, technology and things are changing nearly overnight.
Yeah.
So I couldn't imagine, even missing, saying, like, 50 years and waking up in 50 years' time. You wouldn't know what the world would look like.
Yeah.
Our dictator, Elon Musk, making everyone drive Teslas or something.
And he's running Google as well.
Yeah, and he's like, everyone must laugh at my jokes because I am the funniest man.
I invented a new coin.
Yeah.
So my favorite character in this movie, well, obviously besides the main characters, Andy and Red, I mean, I do prefer Red. I think probably because I share his kind of point of view. It's a bit more realistic and less hopeful. But if we talk about like the side characters, the good guys, Brooks is definitely up there. Brooks is such anchor for the moments that, like even though I know that he doesn't get much screen time, but every time he's on screen, it seems very genuine. And
do you remember the first scene he's introduced?
It's in a library, isn't it?
It's when they're eating. The first time Andy's eating, and he finds a bug.
Yes.
He finds a bug in his food, and then Brooks is like, "Are you going to eat that?" And he's like, "You want to eat this bug?" He's like, "I didn't plan on it." And he like takes it, and then he's got like a little bird.
Jake.
Yeah, the little bird in his jacket that he feeds it to.
Man, I mean, hey, if you want to talk about favorite side character, Jake is definitely up there as well. Jake is a crow, by the way, but Brooks is such an interesting character. He doesn't appear much on screen, but he's always seemed to be very happy in prison. Like if you think about that, like, it really set up well for his, his incidents later. And so, what do you think about the relationship between Red and Andy?
I think it's quite good. Like you said, Red is more like realistic and like, you kind of just got to kind of put your head down and deal with being in prison, trying not to ruffle too many feathers and not getting your hopes up, where Andy's like trying to find a way to keep hopeful. Yeah. Because he's always trying to find the next thing he can do or something he can figure out to like motivate him or push him forward. Because he does that quite a lot. And I feel like it's a good contrast.
Yeah.
Because every time Andy comes up with an idea, Red's like, "What are you talking about?
Yeah, no,
like,
you shouldn't do this.
This isn't going to work. This shouldn't work."
Yeah.
And then it ends up working, and it's just like, just interesting because Red's just like, "What is happening?" Like this, because the first time when they're on the roof and they're tarring the roof,
Yeah.
and the captain, he's complaining because he gets the money.
Yes.
I can't remember. It was someone passed away and there's like a bit of inheritance or something.
Yes.
And he's like, "Oh, the government's gonna take all my damn money."
Yeah.
And Andy, like, he's worked in a bank, so he's like, goes up to them, and then the guard's like, "What the hell are you doing here? Go back to work." And he's like, "I can make you get all that money."
Yeah.
Well, he starts off more provocative. He's like, "Do you trust your wife?"
Yeah, yeah.
And he's like, "What are you talking about?"
I mean, I'm pretty sure Andy would do really well as a TikToker now. Like all that shock element.
The shock element. But it was quite interesting. That's like his first like big leap when they're like, "Why is he going to talk to the guards?" And like, "What's he trying to do?"
Yes.
And then he eventually convinces the captain. He's like, "Hey, I know how to work with money. This is how you do it. If you get me the things I need, I'll do it for you. But you got to get me and my mates some beers."
Such an Australian thing to ask.
Well, it's an American movie, but
Yeah.
it's more the idea of like he's given up something because they're all thinking like, "Oh, maybe he's doing it to get in their good graces or whatever."
Yeah.
So he
Yeah.
isn't treated as badly.
Yeah.
But he does it. It seems like he does it more for them
Yeah.
and himself to like, "Oh, this feels normal." Because as Morgan Freeman read, he's like talking
Yeah.
about it, and he's like, at the end, he's like, "Oh, I feel like he's done this just so he can feel normal again."
That's great.
And because he doesn't even drink the beer, he turns it
He
down.
didn't,
One
yes.
of them picks up the beer and is like, "Oh, would
Yeah.
you like one?" He's like, "Nah, stop drinking." Obviously, at the start of the movie,
Yeah.
he's drinking and has the gun,
Yes.
thinking about going into,
Interesting.
That's
an interesting point. And you mentioned like the word contrast, which I love so much about this movie. But you mentioned, in that scene on the roof when Andy approached Captain Hatley, and he started talking to him about like the inheritance and the tax and things like that. And immediately Red told him, "Hey Andy, what are you doing? Come back here." So yeah, like that's definitely right. And it's like it's strange because they have such opposite views of the world, but they still get along so well. And like the bond formed like throughout the years, it's just beautiful to see. Now, speaking of the characters, I think it would be a shame if we don't talk about the antagonists in this movie. Just like any superhero movie, guys, like if you want to have a good superhero movie, you need to have an excellent supervillain. And boy, there are so many.
Well, there are,
There are so many villains in this movie. So we have the sisters.
The sisters,
The sisters, Captain Hatley.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, after the roof, he kind of became like the anti-hero.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like the
But
guardian angel.
still not good, I would say.
No, he wasn't a good person, I would say.
He's still motivated by his own desires. He wasn't doing it to help anyone.
Yeah, but after the roof scene, I think like we could tell that he didn't contribute much to Andy's progress anymore. But at the beginning, he was like he made him go through all the hard times. He beat the shit out of him, So, and of course, Warden Norton, like the big bad of this movie. But So, what do you think about the villains in this movie?
I think they do a great job of introducing people that are like contrast to what's going on. Obviously, they're in a prison, so there's always going to be people, that are in power and in control over their position, and they can't really say much against them. And even when they do something horrible, because even in the first scene, they're in the prison that night, they all the prisoners have like a gambling thing to see who's going to break first, who's going to cry first. And then eventually they make one of them break, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, we've done it." And the guards realize this, and they tell him to shut the hell up. Yeah. And the guy that has broken, he's still crying and carrying on. And the captain, he gets him out and beats the absolute shit out of him. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so brutal.
This is so wrong as well.
Yeah,
it's the first
exactly.
night there as well.
And then the next morning, they ask, like, "Oh, what happened to him?" And he's like, "Yeah, he's dead. The doctor wasn't in, so he just lied on the bed and just like died in the infirmary." And then Andy asks, like, "Oh, did anyone know his name?" And it's like, "Why should we care about who he was?"
Definitely.
And it kind of shows that Andy has a bit of like still has a bit of humanitarianism to him, even though after all the things that have like, even that's pretty early on, and you still like you don't know why, like, you know, you don't know if he's innocent or not at this point. It doesn't really show what's going on later down the line, but it still feels like, oh, he doesn't, you know, he definitely feels a bit different than everyone else in here, even though it's the first day. Yeah,
that's an interesting point. Like throughout the movies, they kind of establish that Andy doesn't really fit in here. And since the beginning, just like you said, you know, like when all the other prisoners are trying to get some other guys to start crying, and, you know, he was the only guy who asked about the name when none of them care about the name. And that's so, that's so interesting that you mentioned that. What would you do if you are in his situation and nobody knows your name? His name is such a very funny thing, right?
Well, it's always so rough because, like, once you're in prison, they don't, you know, it's meant to be the thing in this. It's just like, oh, they don't care who you are or what you are as well. And it's kind of like everyone has their own selfish desires in there, so they're not too worried about who you are until maybe you become relevant and are needed. So it's like, and especially your name's like given to you at birth, and it feels so wrong to be like, how could, especially with this character, how he's dead and no one knows who he is. He's kind of just, you know, in and out, and it's just like, well, you know, it is the other prisoner's fault because they were trying to rile him up just for some, you know. I remember like looking at the table, and it's like, oh, his price of this guy's life.
Oh,
was like,
the cigarettes. They were getting cigarettes.
It was literally like, you know, a pack of cigarettes for this poor man's life. And it's like, you know, no matter what he did, you know, they riled him up to, you know. That's
very interesting because obviously Australia is very famous for all the prisons and things like that. And when I did a tour of the prison, they mentioned that when the prisoners are in jail, they give them a number instead of a name because I think the understanding of that time is like when you have committed a crime, you have forfeited your humanity. You don't deserve to be human because you didn't behave like one. So when you're in prison, you're just a number. But then it's interesting to see it from the other point of view, like from the people who have just been there.
Because even saying that early in the movie, it kind of shows that they dehumanize them. Like when they're cleaning them all in the cage, when they're just hosing them down and then they throw all that crap on them, they make them walk through naked. Because it just shows them that now that, you know, now they're nothing. They're kind of born again into this system like they were at the beginning of their life naked.
Yes.
So everyone's staring at them.
Yes. And then obviously brutal. Like the first person that they see after being through all that is the warden.
Yeah, exactly.
He's like the god to them, like pretty much. He was carrying the Bible.
Yeah. And that's a big theme in this as well, like the religion for him and how he uses it to like kind of control things. And it's like, you know.
Do you remember the first dialogue that the warden told the prisoners?
Was it a line from the Bible? I think it was, wasn't it? Did he quote the Bible?
Yeah, well, I think what he said was like, there are only two rules in this prison.
Yes.
The first one is you always trust the Bible, trust the Bible, and your will is in God's hand or something, and then your ass belongs to me. Yeah. Well, he definitely sets the tone there. But let's talk about the warden. What was your first impression of him?
Well, early on, he just seems like you said, he kind of just like, oh, he's just a hard ass, making sure there's going to be no trouble or whatever. But obviously, as the movie develops, it kind of shows more about his character and how he does things, where it's like, oh, he's not just like a warden. He's got a lot of other things kind of going on that he's trying to like benefit for himself. Obviously, when they figure out Andy is good with money and can figure things out, they're like, oh, we can use him for our own benefit. Because there was points that he introduced the bill. That was like the big point when he introduced a new bill that he's like, oh, we can use prisoners as cheap labor to do work. Yeah. And then he uses that to undercut everybody else that's doing their jobs. And pretty much just take all that money, and then he gets Andy to like filter all the money out so he can pretty much have it all. And even if you see one of the scenes when they're cutting down all the trees, sound like an acquaintance goes up to him and is like, hey, can you please not take the road job because I really need it, I'm going to go under, and then essentially bribes him to say, hey, can you not do this? He's like, oh, you don't need to worry. It's all right. You've paid me off. I'm not going to do it, because he's only worried about the money in the end. And that seems to be his like running motivation for this holy man is money. He seems to be really driven by money.
I heard some other podcasts they mentioned that he is a walking contradiction, and I think that's a very good way to describe him.
Because that final scene really does it when the police have come to arrest him.
Yeah,
and they have the glimpse of he has the I can't remember the lines. He had the line from the Bible. And
the salvation lies within. Or something. So the Bible on his wall is a different line. I think it's like punishment or something about the punishment.
Yeah, and it's like it's showing that he's getting his now after all the stuff he has done.
Yeah, I think like we have to give the actor some credit for portraying such a good antagonist. Bob Gunton, he's such a good actor. I mean, and the thing is like up until now, even though that we have watched the movie and obviously we know that he's the antagonist, but I don't really hate him. That's the thing, because like can you imagine if you are a warden of a prison of like pretty high security level and you deal with like crooks and like bad people all the time, do you really think that you can run a place like that with humanity and empathy?
Like I think it'd be nice if there was, but I can understand the hard approach of being like, I've got to be hard on these people to keep them in line. But as you see later down in the movie, he's not doing things to keep the prison in line. He's doing it for his own greed. That's the difference. Like I can understand him being a hard ass at the start, making sure everyone's staying in line because you're dealing with some dangerous people. But there's a point where you go too far.
And the moments that really does it for me, when obviously he does things wrong by Andy, when when Andy found out that he might have a chance to be proven innocent.
I think it was Johnny. Is that his name?
So
Tommy.
Tommy, but it's not. Well, Tommy was going to testify, but Tommy heard this story from another person.
Yeah.
Elmo Ranch or something.
Yeah.
And like Tommy was ready to take that story to a court
if they need to, if they're going to go to court to figure out what actually happened.
And that moment really turned it for me. Like before that, I didn't hate him, but from that moment, I was like, yeah, he's a bad guy.
Oh yeah,
definitely a bad guy.
Pretty much as soon as he figures it out, he sends a message off to the captain, and they shoot him. So
I mean, besides all the money laundering,
before that stuff, but it's pretty brutal that it's just like. He obviously went to speak to him outside, so when he gets shot, he can be like, oh, no.
He's trying to escape.
He got shot trying to escape.
That's crazy.
He thought about it a little bit, but it's still like pretty brutal. Like, he doesn't want to help this guy. He figures out he's clearly has not committed this crime, and he's like, well, I need him in my back pocket because he's going to launder all my money.
Yeah. Well, just like Andy said that, I'm just a fancy pet. It's good to keep him in his pocket. I mean, it's not very different from today's from today's kind of societal running. Every rich person has an accountant and a lawyer behind them, right? So, what about some of the favorite scenes in this movie?
I think there was a lot. This movie shot very well.
Yeah.
I think like even the starting scene where they're kind of like introduced at Andy's wife and his lover, and they're like going off, and it's got some cheerful music. Then it like goes to Andy in his car, and the music kind of switches, and he pulls like a package out, and he has the gun with the bullets.
Yeah.
And then he pulls out his alcohol. I thought that was a really good scene. And it cuts. I think after that it cuts to the courtroom and like gets into that.
Yeah.
And then probably even when they're going to the prison for the first time, where like there was the wide shot to the prison.
Yeah.
And it like shows
like the whole prison.
Everyone. And it seemed like one shot.
Yeah.
Where it didn't seem
cut
or anything.
It's a long take. It's more of a helicopter shot.
Yeah, like that seems like a drone shot now, but back then it was probably a helicopter.
Yeah.
But I thought that was amazing as well.
Yeah.
There's so many good scenes, shots in this movie that have done so well.
But what about the dialogues? Like, let's say, if you have to pick two of your favorite scenes / dialogues, what would that be?
So I think near the end when Andy finds out that he's got someone that can say, hey, they committed the murder.
Oh yeah.
And he's talking to Red, and Red's like hopes hope, you can't have hope. You got to let that go. It's like, it's probably not going to get better. And Andy's like, no, you need hope. Like, you can't give up on hope now. To like, or else how are you going to keep living? There was a line, what was it?
Oh, yeah.
Try to die living or try to...
Get busy living.
Get busy living or get busy dying. I thought that was good.
That was one of my favorite dialogue / scenes of all time, really. Any other dialogues?
Early on when he gets the little pickaxe.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I've got to make sure it's not dangerous. And then he's like, wait till you'll see it. You'll have a good laugh to wonder why I'm not going to use this to escape when he sees it. Red's like, I can see why. It'll take a man 600 years to escape with this.
Yes.
Let alone later on in the movie he says, well, it only took him 20 years.
How long would it take you to
I'd probably give up after a week. I'm like, this is too hard.
Yeah, definitely the scene where Red and Andy had a conversation, and I didn't notice this the first time, but during the second viewing, during that scene, they had that conversation, and Red was sitting down on the right hand side of the screen, and then Andy was standing up on the left hand side of the screen, and the lighting was done beautifully in this scene where they separate the scene diagonally. And Red was sitting in the dark, and Andy was standing in the light. And that's literally the visual representation of the two ideals that is conflicting in this movie. To hope or not to hope.
Yeah.
It's pretty much...
Because I think that is very much the overlying message in this movie.
Yeah.
Like, because it sets it up so well, because I'd say maybe like the first maybe 2 hours, maybe a bit less, is just like bad things that are happening most of the time. And then it's like Andy doing little things to try find like a little way to find a bit of hope. Yeah. There's the library he tries to get money for so they can have more books and stuff so they can learn more. Yes. The beers with his mates. Yes. When he breaks into the office, or doesn't break into the office, but he's in the office and he puts on the music for everybody. That's a beautiful opera scene. That's a beautiful scene as well. What's that other
if you have to choose between the roof scene and the opera scene, which one would you pick? Which one would be
I like
more favorite?
I think I like the opera scene because it's just such... Like, the beer scene's good. I think that's like a good way to like, he's, But it's him defying the warden and everyone there because he locks the guard in the toilet who's in the toilet so he can play, he can play the music. Yeah. And then he puts it on the loudspeaker and all the prisoners don't know what to do. Because even later in the movie when he's like explaining it, he's just like, oh, don't you guys like... understand what music is and kind of explains that like this is something they can't take from you, this is something you can have and keep. They can't, whatever they do, they can't take that away from you because they all like, they're all a bit like you said, Red, they're all like committed to their situation. They're kind of like, they don't have much hope for getting out or things getting better. Yeah. But Andy's always trying to do little things to make things just a little bit better. Yeah.
If I have to choose between the two scenes, I would pick the roof scene because I think that roof scene is like a really big turning point. Prior to that scene, I think Andy didn't have any wins. He's always been losing.
No, because I think Red, because Morgan Freeman's commentating, narrating most of the movie. Yeah. And at this point, I think he said it's been 2 years, and he says any man at this point had his right to crack until this happened, and then it kind of leads into like the roof scene. Yeah. Because at this point, is it the Queens? They have been...
The sisters.
The sisters, sorry. They've been assaulting him nearly every day, and he's been fighting against them every day as well. Yeah. And it's like, that's a brutal existence for 2 years, doing laundry and trying not to get assaulted.
Yeah. And I still remember, like, the first time I showed this movie to my friends, they were horrified at that scene. Like the first time that Andy had to fight off the sisters and he couldn't. Yeah. And then the camera kind of panned away into the dark, and then my friends, they were shocked because they didn't imagine how horrible that is to be in that situation. Yeah. And that's why, like, if you watch the movie from the beginning all the way into the roof scene, it makes it so much better because prior to that, just like you said, Andy has been through 2 years of challenges and abuse and all those horrible things, and like to be honest, like just like Red said, like after those 2 years, any man would have just jumped off the roof.
Yeah, like pretty much, give in.
Give in.
Like you have every right.
But in this case, like he approached the captain, and he provided a solution to a problem that he has all the rights to not give a crap about.
To give these, not even help these guys, because the captain's been horrible.
Yeah.
It's not like he's a good person to help. He's just like, oh, maybe I can help our situation by helping him.
But that was such a powerful scene, because it really comes down to the choice that you make, right? So in that situation, he was in that scenario, and he had the choice. I was like, oh, I overheard this story, but like, I can do something, but why would I do it? It has nothing to support me at that moment. Obviously, after that, it
builds off it.
It builds off.
But that's like the thing he says, hope. It gave him some hope. He's like, if I deal with this situation going forward, it's going to give me more hope, And because he did that as well, I can't remember if it was the next scene or a couple scenes later when the sisters go after him again.
Yes.
And then they literally beat the shit out of him again.
Yeah.
I think they said he's in the infirmary for 2 months.
Yeah.
And then obviously the captain finds out and beats the shit out of the head guy. Is it Bogues? I can't remember. Bogue, yeah. The main sister.
Yeah.
So, and then he gets kicked out. So it's like it solves that problem
for
him, that he doesn't have to deal with that anymore. But, it helped him out in many ways. But, that's like...
But that's why I mentioned, after that roof scene, the captain, he wasn't an antagonist anymore. He kind of helped.
The thing is, he was
still horrible. He was still
but his motivations wasn't like, oh, how dare he do that to Andy. It was more like, he's making me money.
Yeah.
And you've ruined him for 2 months.
Yeah.
Because I think at that point he was helping out nearly every guard. He was like doing all the taxes and stuff. He was doing it, or money laundering well, not money laundering, but like helping them with money.
Yeah.
Like at this point, I don't think it was so bad, but later on it does. But that's what I mean. And he's like, Did
he get transferred to the library after that?
No. He got. You mean? Yes.
Yeah, right. So he got transferred to the library after that. So he helped Hadley with his inheritance, and then he got transfer into the library to work with Brooks. And then Captain Hadley introduced one of his mates to come in and do the tax.
That was a great scene as well.
I love that scene.
When he talks to Brooks, he's like, have you ever had an assistant? He's like, nah. I've been here like 50 years and they've never given me, someone to help. And I'm like, but because that improves his life a bit as well, like not dredging away doing the laundry I think he was stuck on. And then obviously it leads down because he's doing everyone's taxes and money laundering. So he gets his friends to come in to help. And I think Red's like, I get to come here once a week. And he's like, I'll gladly do this over, I can't remember if it was woodwork or something.
Yeah.
Gladly do the paperwork.
Do you remember the story that Brooks told the first time that Brooks met Andy? When Andy got transferred to the library, and Captain Hadley introduced one of his mates to come to do the tax. So Andy was like, "Hey, do we have any pencil, and paper?" So Brooke gave him a pencil and a piece of paper, and then it cut to the lunch scene, and Brooke was like, "So the first thing that Andy said to him was, Mr. Stevens, which school do you want your kid to go to, Harvard or Yale?" And then Brooke was like, I swear to God, like the face of the guy just like dropped. And I wish I could have seen that in the movie. But Brooks, but Brooke is such a likable character, and he's definitely one of my favorite side characters. And that's why it really hurts when he got released. At first, like during the first viewing, I didn't really understand why he didn't like it when he got the news that he was going to be released. So I still remember that scene, like Andy was on the way to the library as usual, and then one of his friends, like Hayward, ran out, and he's like, "Oh, Brooks is going crazy." And I said, what's going on? And then they said, "Oh, he's being released tomorrow or something." And then Brooks was trying to...
He had one of their mates, and he had a knife to his throat because he didn't want to get out.
Yeah, and that's why it hurts so much when you mentioned that he got out and he saw all the cars, and he works in the...
grocery store. He's like a bag man. He's like, I've got sore hands. I'm a bit slow.
Yeah, that's beautifully done, and and that scene was like, it still haunts me into this day.
Because they're reading his letter, right?
Yeah,
and it's like explaining up to that point when he's done, and then like they continue reading the letter, and it's like, oh, this is kind of horrible. And all the mates are like, some of them are like, oh, we wouldn't have done that. And he's like, say that after you've been here for 50 years.
Yeah.
Just having some perspective, like,
That's what Red said. Yeah. I think Red says like, these wars are funny. You know, at first you hate them, and then you love them.
He's like, you hate it, but they slowly grow on you because you don't have much choice.
Yeah, and then you become dependent on them. And Red said something like, I'm trying to remember. He said, so in here, Brooks is an educated man. He's a respected man. Outside, he's just an old man, a scared old man. And I can't imagine like what Brooks was going through in that room when he decided to, end his life. There is an interesting side character that I want to talk about, Tommy, the young Elvis, Mr. Rock and Roll, as Morgan Freeman calls him. What do you think about Tommy?
I thought it was a good contrast because at that point, how long had Andy been in there? Like 20
years?
Yeah. Like, it's been there a long time.
Yeah, a long time.
And it's just like, here's this new, like, upbeat kind of young guy who's been in and out of prison. He's kind of charming, and they all kind of like him from the get-go. And then first off, they're like, what are you going to do with yourself? And he's like, and he's like, Andy's like, he's doing a program to help people, like, graduate high school. And he's like, maybe you can help me with that. And it's kind of good to see that, like, this is for Andy as well, finding hope in something. He's like, I can help this kid maybe have a better life for himself because he's not in here for a long time. Maybe he can do something better. Because Tommy's, I think the narrating was like, Tommy had a young wife and a kid. So he's like, I need to do a bit better for myself because, I can have a better life.
Yeah.
If I graduate in here and I can do something. Because he didn't even know how to read. Because Andy has to teach him how to read to begin with.
I love the scene where Andy like underlines the nouns, and the kid was just underlining 2 nouns, and then he missed one. And
he missed one.
Yeah,
I probably would have done that. I probably would have missed it.
But a lot of people think that. Well, I mean, I had this kind of thinking that the scene with Andy taking Tommy under his wing, a lot of people think that scene is unnecessary to the movie. People think that without all that sequence, if we get introduced to Tommy briefly with the narration, for example, and then during one of the conversations, Tommy mentioned that he knew about Elmo Blatch and the guy who committed the murder of Andy's wife back then. Then that wouldn't have made any difference to the movie at all. If you would have cut out the part where Andy helped Tommy get the high school degree, then the movie would have been the same.
I don't think so at all, because I think it develops his character, and like it's always nice to see someone's motivations for things. And early on, Tommy asks Andy, he's like, what did you do? Yeah. And he's like, I'm innocent. That's like the running joke. They're all innocent.
Yeah, we're all innocent here.
So from the get-go, he doesn't tell him what he's done. And then they get closer together, and then Tommy asks Red. He's like, Red, what did he do? And he's like, he murdered his wife. His wife and the lover.
The lover, yeah.
And he's like, who was the lover? He's like, it was a golf pro. And he's like, it clicks in Tommy's head that he's heard it before.
Yeah.
So that kind of makes, that's all part of it as well, is that him getting to know Andy and kind of liking him and like asking him personal questions like, I would have liked to know. And then asking Red, who's his mate, he's like, what actually happened? And then it's like, now I've got a motivation to tell them about this. Like if they didn't know them, why would they even bother? Why would Tommy bother telling him?
Good point.
Like, like if they weren't friends and he's just like, he just said that like, I'm in here for murdering my wife and her lover. He mightn't have been like, I'm willing to
that's a very good point.
Reveal the information I have. But because Andy's helped him a lot and they're close, he's like,
I should help him.
Yeah. It's like, crap. And then obviously later, as we talked about that scene when the warden gets him shot because he has the information. But it's meaningful as well because you're rooting for Tommy a bit because he's like, even when he's doing the tests, he's a bit overwhelmed and he doesn't think he can do it. Yeah. But he ends up passing. And he's like, he can have a better life. Yeah. There's some hope there for him.
Yeah.
But then the warden, with his greed, is just like, no. No. And also not wanting to help Andy, but he's just like, and it means more. Yeah. When Tommy gets shot, because like if you have another quick scene, it's just like maybe you don't care about Tommy as much when he gets shot, and it's just like that makes sense, and you're not. But now you feel for him. It's like he's had a kid, he's learnt a lot, he's grown, because he's clearly like a young, kid that doesn't know much and he's just kind of robbing. And you can see he's a bit of a smart ass. The first scene, he's like, I'm there with the TV and the cop asked me to put up my hands. And he's like, if I put up my hands, I'm going to break this TV. And then you're going to get me for breaking property as well as robbing. And it's just like, oh, this is kind of cool. It's like, he's a funny guy. And it's like, if you miss out on all this, and it's just like...
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. I think if they have cut out that part of the training or of the education that Andy gave Tommy, then we wouldn't have cared about Tommy. Or better yet, Tommy wouldn't have cared about Andy.
Yeah, enough. As well.
Yeah,
he might have been like, oh,
that's fantastic.
Plenty of people have killed their wives after they cheated.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And so let's talk about the operations that Warden Norton has going in the prison.
Oh God!
What was the first kind of detail that told you about the operation that he has going on? I'm trying to remember. I think that after the library.
Yeah, maybe after the library, but like, because all we knew is like there was just a little bit of stuff, but nothing too crazy. I think literally. Yeah. The bill was the biggest thing when he's like...
Yeah.
It really shows his like corrupt side.
That's right. So I think like after
it was like a little bit there, but like that was the bill. When he passed the bill for him to make it like, oh, I can just send these guys out and work for nothing and I can make all the money.
Yeah.
Because I don't have to pay them.
Yeah.
And then like obviously it's just like all the other things is just like, oh, we just take the money and we just make it go somewhere else.
Ah, yes, you're right. So I think after the conversation he had with the contractor, like the other contractor, he got the cake.
Yeah. And that was the bribe,
yeah. And he brought it back to Andy. And I think from that moment on, he's like, oh, just take the cake.
Yeah.
Like, the wife can't
bake.
Cook,
can't bake, so I'm not going to eat it.
Yeah.
So it even like, you know.
And then after that, I think it led to the library scene again when Andy had a conversation with Red. And he was like, oh, so let's say if the FBI, CIA finds this.
Yeah, he's explaining how he laundered the money, essentially, that's a great scene.
Oh, that's awesome scene.
And they're all putting the books back, and he's talking about how, he's like, oh, wouldn't it all lead back to you? But he's like, no, I've made this other person.
Randall Stevens.
Yeah, I've made all of the, like, you know, I've got the birth certificates. I've got all the things I need to make him seem real.
Yeah.
But he's not real. And he's just like, what? Like, what do you mean?
That was one of the moments that, you know, I think I was mind blown. I think Red was mind blown in that scene as well. And he said something like really great in that scene. He said, you know, outside, I was an honest man, straight as an arrow. I had to go into prison to become a crook.
Yeah, that was a great line as well.
Great line.
And it's like, well, yeah.
Great line. Yeah. And so Tommy was like a catalyst for Andy to really determine his escape.
That was the final, you know, the final straw. It was like the thing that finally broke him, where he's like, well, you're not going to help me when I'm clearly innocent, or at least have the ways to prove that I'm innocent. Yeah. And that was good as well, because at this point you didn't really know about the tunnel or him trying to escape.
Yeah.
You had no inklings of that. Because even he was acting weird that day. Because I think they put him in isolation for 2 months. Because they're like, we're not talking the warden didn't want him to talk about this stuff, about him being free and how he was innocent. It's like, well, you're going to think about it. And then, you know, because that's how he finds out Tommy dies, because he's initially in there for bringing it up.
Yeah.
And then obviously the warden finds out and gets him shot.
Yeah.
And then he finds out in there, and it's just like, well, you know, I need to be done now.
Yeah.
And that's when kind of his whole plan is revealed.
Yeah.
Obviously, when he's talking to Red about the whole thing, that's like the first inkling. It's like, oh, you know, he's made this whole other personality or whole person. Like, how's that going to come into play?
Yeah.
And then you see when he finally decides. Yeah, when he finally escapes, and he's like, oh, okay. And then he goes to all the banks, and that's how he explains. He goes to the banks, and he pretends.
I love that scene so much, but let's talk about like the ending sequence. You know, like after Tommy was shot, and you know Andy had been in the hole for 2 months. He got out, and he had the conversation with his friends after that. And you know, he talked about music and hope. Again, and during that scene, Red was saying something like, Andy, you need to get out of your head.
Yeah.
It's just dangerous.
Because is that when he brings up Mexico the first time? The place? I can't remember the name of the place.
Zihuatanejo.
Yeah, I was listening. I'm like, I've got to try to say that. I ain't going to say that. I cannot pronounce that.
You know, like I couldn't remember the name of that bay, but I love How I Met Your Mother. And during one of the episodes, Marshall was just like, "Ziwataneho." I was like, "Yep," and just stuck with me. Yep, that's the name of the bay near the Pacific Ocean. But the ending sequence. So after that scene, so Andy kind of acting weird.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, at this point in time, we know that Brooke has gone through and passed away, and he had to like kill himself. So during that time, it kind of gave me the idea that, oh crap, maybe just like you said, like we didn't know about the escape. Obviously, now we've seen it, we know. But during the first viewing, I was like, man, is he going to like kill himself as well?
Because Red thinks that as well. Because he's like, oh, he's worried. He's acting strange. And when he's talking to his other mates about it, one of the mates is like, oh, I got him some rope. He's like, what? Why'd you get him some rope? I'm like, why wouldn't I?
Yeah, Andy asked for it. Of course I will give it to him.
Yeah, why wouldn't I give it to him? And it's like, they're all like, oh, what have you bloody done?
Oh, man. And that evening scene was really intense. Like really, really intense. And, you know, like lights out, and the lighting was done again, like beautifully in this scene. Andy is sitting there contemplating his choices. Again, half of his face is in the dark, and the other half is in the bright side, but with cell bars on his face. And it's like prison or the darkness. There are no other choice, right? So you either stay or you have to liberate yourself. And then the next morning, of course, with the roll call, he couldn't. He didn't come out. The overweight guard came into his cell, and then he couldn't. At first, when he came into the cell, I thought like, oh, we're gonna see something similar to Brooks, but then he vanished. He vanished, and that ending sequence was like orgasmic. Like I couldn't think of another word to say it, but like because we have been through so much with these characters, when just like the roof scene, you know, when they have this small win, it's really enjoyable to see them win. And then during the last sequence, he escaped. He went to all the banks to make some withdrawals. He on the car to Mexico. But then, and for some reason, like when I saw the scene that Andy was driving, I thought, oh, okay, this is the end of the movie. He escaped. But then the movie continued going. I was like, it's still going.
Yeah, it's still going.
Yeah.
But what I also like about that point, you understand why the poster's there. Because there's a lot of scenes in the movie before it brings up the posters. And he's like, oh, sure, it's nice to have the posters, but like, why are they here? Because I think there's one or two scenes where he like stops and kind of stares at the poster. Yeah. And initially I'm just like, oh, okay. It's like, sure, staring longingly, sure. But then you understand it a bit more, that it means a bit more than what they are. It kind of it stands for his other hope for getting out.
Okay. So he wasn't staring at the poster.
The women. But I was like, oh, there's a bit more to it.
Yeah. Amazing.
It's even crazy like when they're trying to figure it out, and it's just like, it's funny that no one ever looked behind that poster.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing for his pickaxe.
Yes.
Early on they do like a room check.
Yes.
And he has the Bible where he keeps his little hammer.
Pickaxe, yeah.
And the warden actually takes it from him, and then they like quote some Bible lines back at each other, and it's like, oh, okay. And then the warden almost takes his book, but he's like, I can't deprive you of this, and like gives it back to him. Yeah. In the scene, you're just like, oh, okay, whatever. And then when you find out later what was really in there,
it's like a double layer of intensity. It makes you think back all those moments, like how many times they have been inside that cell, how many times have they raided that cell, and the Bible, he had it in his hand, and then he gave it back, and he said, oh, salvation lies within. Like, oh, such a good callback.
Because it's great, because like obviously Andy switches the papers on that last day, and he switched one of the money books with the Bible. So when the warden opens it, he sees the empty hole of where the hook or the hammer was, and it's like, he's like, you're kidding me.
Oh, man.
You're kidding me.
That scene is amazing. And of course, you know, like Warden Norton got his punishment. I think the police came for him, and he didn't want to escape. He didn't want to go to prison.
Yeah, well, that's the thing as well. Like, he gave up hope at that point. He lost
straight away.
Yeah, straight away. Because it's just like, you know, he is just as bad as all the criminals he looks after, maybe worse.
Yeah.
But, you know, and that's what's rough. It's just like, well, you know, just...
Did you feel bad for him at that moment?
Not really, because it's just like he has exploited everybody in there some way or another.
Yeah.
And also taking the easy way out with not being like, I'm not going to, you know, have my day in court or whatever to get my punishment. He's just like, well, I'm done. I'm out. Like he didn't, you know, not like all the men he looks after in his prison. He just decided, well, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, and it's just go to show like how well this movie is made. Like it's justifies for you to like
be angry at him.
Be angry at the antagonist.
Yeah,
and only Morgan Freeman can make some scene like that poetic. The last thing that goes through his head.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know if this is the first one his first movie he narrates.
Yeah,
that like leads into like every movie being like, we need Morgan Freeman to narrate this.
Every commercial.
Yeah, everything. Yeah,
every documentaries.
Exactly, but yeah, every time like either he's like stating something or like kind of going over something. Like that's amazing as well. I don't know how they
very smooth.
Yeah, so I don't know how. That's why it's so strange thinking that this movie didn't do well when it first came out, because this is so amazing. Like so many different things in this.
Yeah,
but
it's so quotable. It's so replayable. You know, like when you introduce it to someone and they get the same reaction as you did for the first time.
Because that's what it's like. It's hard. Like I don't know. Like Morgan Freeman would have been big then, but like it's not. You know, like it wasn't marketable.
Yeah,
that was probably the hardest thing about men dealing with prison. It was probably not like a marketable point. That's probably not why.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think of the 90s now, other like popular movies in the 90s. And
yeah,
but the thing is now it's a classic, and everyone probably knows about it.
Yeah,
which is kind of crazy how far it's come.
When it first came out in 1994 to the theater, it didn't win any rewards,
which is crazy as well.
But the year that movie came out, it came out at the same time as Forrest Gump.
Oh, that's crazy.
And Pulp Fiction.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, so obviously the other movies won a lot of awards. Tom Hanks is amazing in Forrest Gump. But, you know, just like you said, you know, people didn't really warm up to the idea of a prison movie. But only after that, it gained a second leg and a third leg. And then people kind of realized how good that movie is. And, you know, it just became like one of the most loved movie of all time. I think probably because it gives people a sense of joy and satisfaction at the end.
Yeah. The ending really, because like I was saying before, there's so much terrible things that happen in this movie till kind of the escape.
Yeah.
And then Andy like sends the note to Red to like, he already hinted at him before when he was like in that scene where Red got worried. He was talking about, you need to go to a field. Oh, where was the city? I can't remember the city.
Buxton.
Yeah, he's like, do you know where that is? Do you know about this field? There's some haystacks. He's like, a lot of haystacks. He's like, go to a field. You see a brick fence or a stone fence, and you'll see a big oak tree.
Yeah.
That's where I married my wife and stuff. He's like, if you ever get out, go there. Yeah. And you'll find there'll be something there under a rock. Yeah. It's obviously not meant to be there.
Yeah, yeah.
And like later on, Red gets out, and every time he's been going to these parole meetings, he's got like his list that he always says. He's like, yes, sir, I've been
rehabilitated.
I'm rehabilitated. I'm going to get out. I'm going to make it. And then they just reject him. But the time he got released, he was honest. He's like, what do you mean? Yeah. What did you want from me? Like, do I regret the things I did? Yes. If I could go back and talk to myself and tell myself not to do it, I wish I could, but I can't. And now I'm just an old man.
Yeah, that's powerful scene.
Yeah, and the guy's just like, okay.
Yeah, okay.
He gave me some shit. He probably deserves to get out now.
Yeah, he can get out now. And I was worried for Red for a moment as well, because obviously he went through the same thing. Because
he does the same thing as Brooks, where it's like, he's dealing with the same things, but the difference was he had the hope that Andy gave him, where Brooks didn't have that.
Yeah.
Red had the hope. It's like, Andy did tell me this thing. Maybe, what have I got to lose? Because when he's going to get the bus to go there, he's like, who's going to check? He's like, I'm going to miss parole, and that's against the law, but who's going to care about an old crook?
Yeah, that's amazing. And a bit of a trivia. That tree, you know, that oak tree, it became a tourist attraction for that area. it's generating 11 to 12 million US dollars of revenue every year. People go to the tree, and they take pictures. And the tree was struck by lightning.
Oh wow!
In 2016, I think. And so now parts of the trees are being kept in the prison site where they shot the movie. So that prison site was scheduled to be demolished after the shooting. But then there was an organization, they want to preserve that site. So they bought the whole site for $1.
Wow.
And they
crazy.
invested all the money back in to turn it into a tourist attraction. And now that plus the tree is generating income for the area.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I wonder if the tree got a cut.
I mean, the tree got plenty of cuts.
Got plenty of cuts, wow.
Yeah. They made a few things out of the remaining parts of the tree. But yeah, that is one of the legacies that the movie is still giving back.
Yeah, it's still giving back
to the community. But but that scene where Red found the black rock, the volcanic rock.
Yeah.
And he found the box. This is one of the small details that I really enjoy. At first, he found the box, and then he started looking around. I would have done the same thing as well.
Yeah. Like, what's going on here?
No, like you look around because like, oh, what's in here?
Yeah,
it might be something precious. And then he found the envelope of money, and he looked around again.
Yeah,
it's like I would have done the same thing too. Of course. Yeah, but yeah, the ending scene was beautiful. They are on the beach. I didn't know how Andy got a boat. He was sailing all the time.
I don't know how, if he just found it, it was just lying there, or...
And he couldn't get... Well, I mean, he got all the stuff that he needed in prison from Red. But Red wasn't there. How did he get the boat?
Yeah, how did he get the boat there? True. Unless he was already sailing on it. He's been stuck there a while. He's like, well, now I've got to fix my boat. He's been stuck on this beach for a while.
And I want to have this section to discuss about the what if questions. So I wrote down a few what ifs just because I had a bit of time. So what if Red and Andy didn't get along? What do you think?
Probably wouldn't have led to where it did, because the rooftop scene probably wouldn't have happened, because he got them in. He was there he got all of his mates to get onto the rooftop. And there's a bunch of other things, like, I know a lot of the other times it's like his contrast, so he's like questioning him and stuff, but he helps him out quite a lot, like getting him in he might have still got him the hammer, because I think they weren't friends at that point. He was just kind of just doing his job. Yeah. Like, he might have still got all that stuff, so like he might have still escaped, but like the ending would have been different. It might have just been Andy like driving off into the sunset by himself.
Yeah. Can you imagine, like, if they couldn't get along, then Red would have ratted on Andy?
I don't know if he would have ratted, but because he didn't know what was happening either.
Yeah,
like, that was the thing. Even when he was his friend, he never found out what was going on until it did happen. And they're like, "How would you know about this?" He's like, "No,
not a word."
Yeah.
What if we had a female character in the movie?
Well, it's a bit hard in a male prison.
Yeah. But it could have been like a love interest on the outside. Maybe his wife didn't cheat on him, and he went to prison, and she comes and visit him, and gives him the hope that he's looking for.
I think that would change the movie quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because the reason initially he's in prison is for the murder of his wife.
Yeah.
So you're changing that motivation. So him going in for prison for something else, and then maybe wouldn't make as much sense for him to be there. Just like, how do you can't put him in there for money laundering, because I think that's a big arc of him like doing it in prison. Because then that line hits hard when he says like, "Oh, I became a crook once I'm in prison, not when I was out."
Yeah.
So it would change that as well. And I think it would be hard, like, not that you couldn't have like a female character, but just kind of the setting, it
doesn't really work.
Wouldn't really work quite as well. Because like, there's not really like a scene that I can think of, like, unless one of them was the guards or something, but that's like a whole different thing as well. Like, like, how would that work and stuff like that? But
it's one of the interesting things about this movie. Like, it barely has any female characters.
Yeah.
Except for the beginning. And the female person that we have from this movie are all from the posters.
Yeah, as well. Like, they're all there's the shot in the movie when they're all watching the movie and they're like, wait, you got to wait for the hair flick thing. And they're all like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And then obviously his posters and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it's tough because I'm trying to think if there could have been a place, but I feel like the movie is so well done that it's just like, it's so hard to try add something to like maybe change the movie.
Yeah.
Change an aspect of it.
Yeah.
It would have been quite rough. Like, it wasn't like, it's just missing this one role that maybe could have changed something.
Yeah.
Like maybe from the Tommy, like maybe if you made Tommy's role a bit bigger, maybe you see his wife. Yeah. But I feel like they already did a pretty good job of making us care for Tommy.
Yeah.
That him, seeing his wife wouldn't have changed as much as hearing of it. It could have been nice, but that's maybe the one thing I can think of the top of my head, but nothing else really.
Yeah. And what about, what if Tommy got a chance to go and testify in court? Then the ending would have been...
I think that would have been an interesting thing. But obviously that's not where the movie was going. But that could have been like, that would be an interesting thing to be like, maybe he doesn't tell the warden and then somehow they'd like decide, hey, Tommy, when you get out of prison in a couple of years, can you try to find me a lawyer or talk to someone and we can try to get a court case going without the warden knowing. Yeah. At that point, Andy probably didn't really know the warden was really like ready to keep him in there for any reason. Yeah. Like he probably thought, maybe he would try to help me because, I've done a lot for him already. Yeah. That's what he was probably thinking because Andy is an honest man and isn't really, he doesn't really take the bad side of people. He tries to, tries his best. Yeah. But I think that would have been an interesting if that was another ending of like them getting him out of prison that way, even though the escape is like so amazing in it as well. That's like another point to this movie that makes it amazing, where it's like, there's this whole thing going under your nose without you realizing until it happens. But that could have been an interesting, another interesting look.
There's one more conversation I want to talk about, which is the I guess the overall idea of the movie, and this goes outside of the movie as well. There is is whether hope a good thing, to hope or not to hope. Because when I first watched the movie, and I kind of relate to Red's kind of ideal, like if you are in a situation, you need to be more realistic, because it's very easy for your hope to be crushed, and then you get frustrated, destroyed in a way. What is your take on that?
I would agree, because when I was thinking about the movie after I watched it, I was thinking because it was hope. They did talk about hope, but I was thinking was it like a lack of motivation? But I don't think that captures it quite as well as like the hope and obviously through the whole movie, Andy had through different points, and we've talked about all of them so far, that every point in this movie he tries to find a new way to find hope, and that right at the end when Red thinks he has that breakdown, when he's like, what are you doing? He thinks something, he's gonna do something bad, but in that way, he's kind of turned it around and given Red some hope that when, Andy got out, and then when Red finally gets out, and when he's thinking to himself, he's like, oh, hey, there is a bit of hope for me to go out and maybe find something for myself as well with Andy, where that's what it's such a good, it does sell that, it's a bit, it gives you a bit of hope. I'm always a bit of a pessimist, so I'm always looking being a bit more realistic and stuff. But it's just trying to find some hope in a hard situation. And, the situations in the movie are pretty damn hard and tough. So it's finding a way to live through them or overcome them, and using hope as that kind of thing to be hoping for the next thing, the next challenge, the next, the next person you meet, or your next goal. It can be very different things that hope stand for. So that's what I came to. I agreed with the overall, because they do bring it up a lot. Yeah. They bring up hope. They talk about it a lot. So I was it does make sense. It does resonate a lot throughout the whole movie. And I do think that's kind of the end, the main message you can take away from this is where it's kind of try to come through things and having your your goal or your hope that you're hoping to get to. Yeah. Because it can be rough when your goals are crushed or your hopes are crushed. Kind of with Andy near the end with Tommy.
Multiple times.
Yeah. Well, it does happen multiple times, but the last straw with Tommy, when he's this is my way out. This is clearly, this is what we can try to get me out. And then it's literally shot down.
Yeah.
His hopes are shot down.
Yeah.
So it's just like, that's kind of like his, but the thing is, the hope he had digging that hole was his other hope. He's like, this is my way out.
Yeah.
And I've had this plan for a long time.
Yeah.
So
maybe like it's strange because maybe if he had gone to trial, maybe he would have revealed that plan to the warden.
well, that's well, you never. That's what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
There's like a whole other thing you go through if they actually go to court. But
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah. So like the core message of this movie, just like you said, hope is a very powerful thing, especially in the difficult situations. But the movie also show us the other side of having your hopes and dreams crushed as well. Think about Warden Norton, when he found out that Andy have bested him.
yeah,
He gave up straight away.
he gave up straight away.
But
yeah,
I'm pretty
exactly.
sure before that he had some big plans. He would have kept running this and then become some celebrity or something.
Well, Andy even said by the time this is done, he'll probably be a millionaire. Or
Yeah, probably he was thinking about like retiring early. Maybe he was thinking about helping his own family. So he does. I still believe that he does have his own hopes and dreams.
yeah,
And
definitely.
I think that's why and that's why this movie is like still haunting me to this day, because that same question, like, should you have your hopes up? It's to hope or not to hope.
Yeah, exactly. It's a hard thing to deal with in life.
Yeah.
Because, like, how do you decide, like, how much you hope for and how much you should put your... Because there are many other movies and stuff. I remember from Dodgeball,
Yeah.
Vince
Vince Vaughn.
He's just like, if you don't have any dreams or any goals, you can't be disappointed.
Yeah.
And I always think about that because it's like, well, if you don't set yourself up for disappointed, you can never be disappointed. But the thing is, you never may achieve that happiness or, that goal in life if you never go for it. So it's like that's the thing. And I was going to say another quote from even in South Park. Butters is sad and crying because he's gotten broken up with his girlfriend. And Stan asks him, he's like, you're so sad. Why did you bother having a relationship? He's like, well, I'm so sad because I had so many good times. So it's like another thing, like the good comes with the bad and how you deal with it going forward is a big thing. And Andy, through this whole movie, he deals with a lot of downs. Like he could have given up, like some of the other characters in the movies where they lose hope and it's like, I don't have anywhere to go. But Andy had another plan or had another goal and is like, I'm going to keep pushing because I'm going to keep hope because, that's going to get me through this. And in the end, he was right. I got him through it.
Yeah. But I would say that Andy's case and Red's case in this scenario is still part of the movie. And I would say they are not the majority. I would say, the situation might not be the representation of the mass. Like even when a lot of people go through difficult situations, not many of them can go into several banks, withdraw some money, go to the Pacific, buy their own business.
There's no obviously, not everyone's life is written like a movie. So it's but like that's the thing, and especially when the world's such a big pace. But you can still have your own goals. It doesn't have to be something so dramatic as laundering money from a warden and then having a grand escape to dig a hole out of prison and then escape and steal his shoes.
Yeah.
So, but
oh man, the shoes.
Like I think you can take that. Like obviously, it never has to be so grand, but it can be small hopes. It doesn't always have to be such a grand, going to Mexico and sandpapering a boat for the rest of your life.
And Ziwatanejo is during one of the interviews with Tim Robbins, he said that I think a lot of people kind of relate to this movie is because a lot of us feel trapped mentally, at one place or in life or at work. And
their own kind of prison.
Yeah, correct. And Ziwatanejo is more like a haven, like a heaven or a destination that where a lot of us strive for. And since Andy's case is not for the mass, that's why it's like a very good representation of hope. Yeah, because it doesn't happen that often, but it does happen.
It does happen. I was going to say before we finished up, this was your favorite movie, right?
Yes.
And you said only 11 years ago. We won't reveal how old you are, but obviously you had watched movies before that.
Yeah.
What do you think about this movie really changed your mind to be like? Was it when you first watched it, you thought, oh damn, this is amazing, or did you think, hey, after I watched it again, it's like, wow, this is really...
I
really
think
one
like
of my
for the
favorite
first time,
movies.
like during the first viewing, I didn't really appreciate it as much. Prior to this, I had known of this movie. Like one of my friends, he watched it like 15 times, and I was like,
So not
"Why?"
too much.
Yeah, like average.
Not average, yeah.
But I think I realized this is one of my favorite movies. Is after the second and the third viewing. After the second viewing, I kind of noticed a lot more details and a lot more nuances, and like even though I have seen this movie before and I know how it's going to end, but it still amazes me on like some of the details that I found about I found in the movie, and it really changed my perspective about movies, because prior to that I watched a lot of action movies with Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal.
Oh God, Steven Seagal.
Of course, we have Arnold Schwarzenegger as well.
Yeah,
a lot of
classic.
the big action heroes. And this
He
movie
was a big
bit of
action hero.
Yeah. but this movie was a very good change of pace. Well, and I think it kind of relates to my situation back then when I first came to Australia. No job, no friends. So it was literally just sitting in my small bedroom and just watching this movie. And at the end, it really gave me hope. It really gave me like,
Maybe I need
hope
to
or something.
Maybe I need to go to Mexico. Maybe Australia wasn't the right place.
Or I just need to
I was
get
going
out
to say,
there.
we do have some nice beaches like that, though.
No, we do. Yeah, we
I
do.
will say that.
And I mean, like 10 years later, and I still think back of that moment. It's like at the end of the movie, it's like, I really need to get out of here. Like get out of the bedroom, not like get out of Australia.
No, that's fair.
Like do something with my life. So, but yeah, and that's why, still this day. So yeah, if you haven't watched this movie, go to Netflix.
Probably give it a look.
Yeah, but make sure that you allocate like a good 3 hours so that you can
Thoroughly enjoy it.
Yeah, you can immerse yourself in the experience. And that's it for today's episode. Thanks, Tim. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, share this episode to your friends and family who love this movie as much as I do. And leave a comment below on the movie that you want us to do next. And anything else to add, Tim?
No, I think that's a good way to end it, you know?
Just go dig a tunnel. Figuratively.
Figuratively, don't go to prison.
Thanks for tuning in. We will see you next time.